Let's go. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, folks, welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. We've been on a hiatus for a long time, but we're now back, hopefully regularly. And I'm very excited to have back on the show Boyan Stanislavski, editor of The Barricade, which is a Eastern European left-wing news outlet, and he's also the co-host of one of the shows on The Barricade, which is On the Barricade, which he often co-hosts with Dr. Maria Cernat, who I've had on the show twice. So first off, Boyan, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Thanks, Youri. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on 1+1.
And likewise, it's an honor to have you on. And also, I was on your program twice, and I'll make sure that people check out the links to that. Actually, anyways, it's an honor to have you back on the show as well. Now, Boyan, the first question I wanted to talk to you about is talk to us briefly, if it's even possible, about the current events, recent elections in your home country of Bulgaria, and what the international left should know about what's happening and what's taking place.
Well, that depends which elections we're talking about, because we are about to have parliamentary elections, early parliamentary elections, and that is a result. Those early parliamentary elections, upcoming ones, are a result of the previous parliamentary elections, which were not early, they were like proper parliamentary elections, but unfortunately the result of them was that the ruling party, the one party, the right-wing, authoritarian, slightly libertarian, obsessively neoliberal, but most of all, oligarchic. Okay, that would be the profile of the party I'm talking about.
Which gangster oligarchic, right?
Yeah. So I'll get to that. But the point being that this party has been, and in particular its leader, the supreme leader, really, of the entire political process in Bulgaria, one Boyko Borisov, they have been in charge for the last nearly 15 years, I think 13, if I'm not mistaken. So that changed a lot. And it also has to do with the protests that had been taking place in Bulgaria from early July, if I remember correctly, last year, until early December. So we're talking about, every day, all right, half a year of protests. Funny thing here, that those protests were very massive, something exceptional in the modern Bulgarian history, and police violence occurred, and they were ignored largely by the European media. And at the same time, those same European media and European politicians and European institutions were eagerly involved in supporting protests in Belarus, which, last I heard, Belarus is outside the European Union. Yeah. And they have, if you like, no jurisdiction there. I mean, what's the point of meddling, all right, in whatever process is taking place there? But okay, that's off tangent kind of. So we had those protests, and this, as I said, was something exceptional in the modern Bulgarian history. So it had to bear fruit politically as well, not just civil unrest. So a few parties were created or established themselves as the parties, political centers, political organizations representing the protests, the protest vote in Bulgaria. And the protest was, in very broad terms, okay, very generally, very superficially, was about overcoming the oligarchic gangsterite regime that has been established in Bulgaria over 20 years ago, after 1997, and even probably, some would argue before that, but let's say that this is the kind of after the 1997 colorful revolution that was staged in Bulgaria, and that was strengthened and solidified after 2000 and well, again, I'm not very good with dates and chronology, but say 12, 13 years ago, okay? With the with the rise of the party I mentioned earlier, GERB, that's the name of the party. It's an abbreviation. It stands for uh, uh, Citizens for the European Development of Bulgaria. That's true. Okay, that's what the party is
Okay.
called, and that's so it's Citizens for the European Development of Bulgaria, and the leader of that party, Boyko Borisov. Right. So we had the protest, and we had the result, the political translation of those protests, and all of those parties, they stood for elections that took place. I think that was April 4th or 5th, at the very beginning of April, the first Sunday, and that that prevented the dominating force that is GERB and Boyko Borisov from achieving results that they had expected. That is to have a majority that would allow them to either rule without any without having to form any kind of coalition,
Yeah.
or to have some kind of hidden coalition. Like formally they wouldn't have it, but they would bribe like one party, some minor party, or some whatever.
Kind of like what took place in Israel when no government was able to
Yes, yes,
form
and by the way,
against
there
God.
that's true. And by the way, I just want to indicate it here that there are certain parallels that you might want to, you might want to draw between the situation in Israel and Bulgaria. Of course, those are two completely different countries, two completely
Yeah.
different cultures, and two completely different situations geopolitically and in all other aspects. Okay, I mean, Bulgaria is a third world country, regardless of the fact that it's formally in the European Union, but it is a third world country, and Israel is a developed country with a strong army, and it's a serious country. I like to
Yeah.
say that the countries in general, there are two categories. There are the serious countries and then the rest of them. Israel is a serious country, but what is the parallel? The parallel is that pretty much at the same time, the Americans seem to have crossed off the list their people in both of those countries. So they crossed off Netanyahu, and like, I don't know to what extent. Like, I don't know what his fate is going to be. He's facing some very serious charges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not very familiar with the political situation in Israel to the extent that I would be able to comment on that competently. But I would, and I don't know whether there were any indications of that previously. But in Bulgaria, once GERB was, once its presence in the parliament was limited to the extent where they cannot rule alone, then the Americans immediately started, looking for for the new man there on the ground who's going to be the viceroy, all right, and whom they're going to give the blessing to rule, and so on and so forth. And I think it's a desperate situation for Borisov, because he's a straight up gangster. So such people, they don't live a long and happy life usually, unless they have a position like, for example, being the prime minister of Bulgaria. So I don't know whom does he own money, how much, and for what, for what kind of criminal activity.
Wow.
But obviously they have, and the Americans have given us already a clear indication that they're writing this guy off, because they officially sanctioned some very important personas, oligarchic figures in Bulgaria that are close to Boyko Borisov, and are part of his gang. Okay, so then they actually organized even a casting. That was 3 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm not very good with chronology, but we're talking about a couple of weeks ago. They organized, a casting. The American embassy, can you even imagine? The American embassy organized a
Who
conference.
wants to be our puppet millionaire?
Yeah, pretty much like that. Like, without saying that, in the like in such an blatant manner, but it was not. But it was overt in a way that they organized a conference. You see, with all opposition parties. All opposition parties took part in a conference. Why would the American embassy invite the Bulgarian parties to the conference? Like, can you give me any idea about that? Of course, it was about corruption, how to fight corruption, because there's, now the Americans have established that there is corruption in Bulgaria, as if if it wasn't the case for the last 20 years plus, right?
Yeah,
But now there's
exactly.
corruption in Bulgaria, so yeah, they have to do something about it, and they're discussing it. They're engaging in a sort of political dialogue with all the meaningful political forces in Bulgaria on the topic of corruption and how to combat it. And of course, like if you're a thinking person and if you know anything about the Bulgarian political process, then you know that every major political decision, and if someone doesn't know, then please take my word for it, or you can, afterwards verify it. Multiple analysis and articles on the Barricade, on many other websites in English, even non-left-wing websites, because it's irritating for everybody the extent to which we are a kind of a client state of the United States. If we're a state, that's a different that's a different question.
Yeah.
But the government, okay, the government is extremely obedient, and there is not a single, not a single major decision within the framework of the internal Bulgarian political process that would not have received the blessing of the American embassy or would not have been consulted with the American embassy. So obviously, what the Americans are doing, I find it abhorring. But it's like, why wouldn't they act otherwise? I mean, I cannot see for the time being anyone that would be prepared to actually challenge this, pathological. That's the word we have to use here. Model.
Wow. So, and just before I get to my second question, because you mentioned Belarus, which I definitely want to talk to you about. So at the moment, there's no elections coming up in Bulgaria. They're trying to negotiate how.
No. There is elections coming up in Bulgaria,
Okay.
because, still we have a constitution, so the Americans can rule as much as they like, but we have to at least pretend we obey the constitution. So we cannot really, not cancel the elections just because the Americans have chosen their viceroy. If they did, I don't know whether they did. There is no, I follow the website of the American embassy in Sofia very closely. And I, by the way, those who don't believe me, please follow this website and see what's there. And if you will see it for yourself. They do it in a very overt manner. So you will see that they are just, they're not meddling, they're directing, they're orchestrating the process, the political process in Bulgaria. So, they haven't put out, there is no communique there that I could refer to and say that, okay, they've made their choice. Obviously, it's going to be this one or that one or whatever. They're probably going to have to wait.
But basically, spoiler alert, this, the current oligarch, right-wing oligarch that's, the current oligarch that's been ruling Bulgaria since the end of the USSR.
No. You're confusing, or maybe I confused, or maybe I explained it in a confusing manner. So no, this guy Boyko Borisov, he's a gangster and so on and so forth. But his only relation to whatever happened before 1989 was the fact that he used to be the guard, the bodyguard of the former dictator Todor Zhivkov, the guy who ruled Bulgaria from 1960 whatever 201 or something until 1989, pardon. And then he was not in power. Then he was just a regular gangster. He only, he was only basically conducting criminal activity. There's plenty of evidence. Basically, it's a matter of public record how he organized people to, for example, rob trucks. With all kinds of load. Transiting through Bulgaria. Then there were some other things like this, which at the moment I cannot recall. But once he entered politics, which was at the beginning of the 21st century, then he never gave up on his criminal stuff. He just sort of pushed the bar a little higher, and now there's no evidence for it that we could produce and show to people. But there's been multiple leaks saying or hinting at the fact that he's doing criminal business with Recep Tayyip Erdogan's, the Prime Minister of Turkey, President of Turkey, son. And we're talking about drug trafficking of people, the worst kind of things that you can imagine, right? And at the same time, there are other leaks, that we've. I don't know to what extent one could, how credible they are, because but it sounds like it's absolutely legitimate. I mean, to me, I mean, I believe that. I'm prepared to believe that, at least, or to give it a credit of whatever credibility. That at the same time, they are very clumsy. I mean, our gangsters, okay, they don't know how to really do certain stuff. That's why they have to rely on strong and serious people like Erdogan's son, for example, or something like that. And once there was even a case when they tried to go to a Libyan bank, I think, or some Arab bank via Libya, where they were gonna no, sorry, not Libya, Lebanon. Lebanon, that's important, because what happened is while they were on the way to that bank, in their private jets or whatever, carrying tons of money, cash on them, they were robbed by Hezbollah, which is probably, the yeah. So
make this
I mean,
shit
this is
up.
if it weren't tragic for the millions of people that have to endure all kinds of hardships and civilizational downgrade because of those morons, then I think it would have been fun. It would have been very funny,
Jesus.
Yeah. So that's
it looks like this guy might be on his way out. But then
yeah.
But then if he
and
is
there is upcoming elections.
But if
there
he
is upcoming elections.
But if he is replaced by some, I mean, I don't see. There's nothing positive about liberalism. But if he is replaced by some liberal, reformer, it's basically like Western picks, even if it is like some new startup party, right?
No, that's out of question. If he's going to be replaced by anyone, I don't think there's a replacement really for him at the moment, because there are some parties. The only opposition center that makes that you could that may well, I don't know, I don't want to use the word serious because they aren't very serious, but the only opposition center which is a real opposition, which could be referred to as real opposition, is the Bulgarian Socialist Party. And I know many people in Bulgaria are going to disagree with me, because this is a right-wing party, in fact, when you look at their program and their
the Bulgarian
and their
Socialist
messages.
Party.
Yes, Socialist Party, which but regardless of all their flaws, and there are many, they are the only political organization with any meaning that actually speaks about the need to support the poor, or to to demonstrate to organize state assistance for people who aren't able to get by in this barbaric circumstances that that are in place in Bulgaria. So they are, and unfortunately, that's what happened during the elections on on April 4th. What happened is that this party actually, it was always the second parliamentary force, the second biggest parliamentary force. Okay, it has always been this, after GERB took power and after GERB became the dominating force. And for the last 15 years, for the last, I don't know how many rounds of elections we had then, it was always the second parliamentary force, and it was the opposition. It was like, they were the guys, right? And now what happened is one of the a popular TV host, okay, in Bulgaria, he formed a party that was that allegedly represents the protesters, and the party is called, the party has a very strange name. It's called There Is Such a Nation, or There Is Such a People. And it totally makes no sense. I mean, the guy has no understanding of politics whatsoever. He is a used out.
The Bulgarian Zelensky, safe to say.
Oh, worse than that. I think worse than that, because Zelensky, he was at least a good actor, and this guy, he's a good singer, but he became the trendsetter for many culturally I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Degrading crap. Degrading. Thank you. I'm sorry about the confusion. Yeah, degrading crap. Okay, so
oh my god.
Yes, and he's been around pretty much since the beginning of the 90s, and and he's not really clean of connections to the oligarchic world in Bulgaria. He's had many connections with the oligarchic circle that was the rival circle to the one represented by Boyko Borisov. That Boyko Borisov eventually kind of won the competition, if I may say so, and became the prime minister of Bulgaria, and has been that for the last nearly 15 years. And the early elections are going to be held because the parliament that 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 was formed, as a result of the elections on April 4th, is unable to rule, is unable to elect a government, because there aren't. It's just mathematically, if you like, impossible, and also because of the certain kind of populist care. How to say this? That they kind of, the leaders of those parties that claim they represent the protesters, they kind of got carried away, and they after the election, after it turned out that they actually entered the parliament. I mean, their parties are going to be represented in the parliament. They just, they couldn't stop running their mouth. I mean, they were shouting against, how they're not going to go into any coalitions, how they're going to, make sure that the entire dirt is being, wiped off the political map of Bulgaria, how they're going to,
Oh wow.
how are they going to, sort of make things great again, like Bulgaria is suddenly going to become this non-corrupt, super developed, whatever, economically thriving country.
Which is still a
And
member of which is still a member of NATO, right?
yeah, which is still a member of NATO. But what I'm trying to say is that, it's because of their totally unpolitical behavior, they were not even able to shake hands at one moment, okay? Despite the fact that they claim to represent pretty much the same sector of the society. Although this, of course, there are many divisions within those. There were many, and there are many divisions within those that have been taking that had been taking part in those protests. So it's a complicated situation. I think the Americans are actually waiting for the things to clarify a little bit, and we're going to have the second round of casting, I suppose, and perhaps then it's not going to be done in such an overt manner. We had a discussion about that with Maria Cernat and with our guest from Bulgaria, Georgi Hristov, who actually said that we can talk about that until tomorrow. Okay, how terrible things are in Bulgaria, how what a mess, what a civilizational downgrade, what a disaster, what utter collapse of the statehood, of the of the nation, if you like, of the society, of the culture, of everything. Okay, we can talk about that until the cows come home, as the Americans like to say. So we could do that, but let's, there's no hope for any better past. We're not going to have a better past. We could have a better future, and that's what we should be focusing on. And now the question is,
How do
what do
you
we do? What do we do?
exactly? So it sounds to me, it reminds me of the Frank Zappa song, "The Torture Never Stops," and it seems like, okay, guys, it sounds to me as if people should not even be worried about what will be the parties, what the electorate thinks will be the best future. In the end of the day, the people power movement in Bulgaria, as small as it is, just has to be very prepared, very vigilant. That, okay, we need to be prepared with whatever Western-backed stooge is going to take power, or whatever con artist is going to, fool the public, and just work on building, as you said to me last time, work on building a true left, which is not going to happen in 2 months. It's not even going to happen in a year. That people have to basically be
yeah, it might not happen in a year,
right?
or it might not happen in 2 months or 2 days. But let us not forget that sometimes things happen so that within 2 or 3 days you can make steps forward that you wouldn't expect being able to take in 20 years or something like this.
Yeah.
So many things depend on the external circumstances, on all kinds of factors that, and you never know. Like, of course, you can predict that nothing's going to happen in Bulgaria for the next, I don't know, 10 or 15 years in terms of emergence of some kind of vivid and vigorous, left wing social movement. Maybe not, or maybe yes. I don't know. But one thing is certain, that we have to have a program for a long-term strategic orientation, okay, systemic orientation, and a program for now.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what the Bulgarian left, in my opinion, is largely lacking. It's not only the Bulgarian left; it's pretty much most of the left, really, all over the world. And I think that it makes sense, definitely, to state that however small the left wing is, they should come together, and they should work together, and they should try and figure out the ways to move forward even in those difficult circumstances. And
Yeah.
of course, probably wouldn't. It's not a surprise to you. It's not happening. Same as it's not happening in Poland. It's not happening. Well, in Poland, it's happening to some extent. We could talk about that, but there's pretty much no unity, and this is one of the biggest problems. And also, there's very little, in my opinion, incentive to actual political work that would be outside, out of the box in a way. What the work that I see is pretty much well, it's not strictly academic work, which I don't have anything against. Academic work is very valuable, but it's not building. This is not how you build a movement. This is how you can get the best position of all, which is great because you have all the information, But the left is not about getting the best positions. The left is about creating a social movement, even with some erroneous positions in the beginning, or I don't know, at a later stage. It doesn't matter. There, errors could be rectified normally. I think this is not doing, and this is why I'm not very optimistic, and this is why Georgi Christov, the guest I mentioned that was on our show, On the Barricades, he said the same. Look, the future is bleak because we're going to have a new viceroy, or maybe we're going to have a few people sanctioned that are this rapacious oligarchs, and that's very good. They should be sanctioned. They should all be in jail and so on and so forth. But from the point of view of what I represent, of what I stand for, what we stand for, no changes are could be seen on the horizon. And you say that it could happen so that some liberal people are gonna become they're gonna substitute for for Boyko Borisov. Okay, well, maybe, but even so, like, how does it
The unjust,
how is it of any
unjust system
importance?
remains in place. That's the
How is it
problem.
of any importance? What do you actually think, or what you're posturing? Because I don't believe that there are any true liberals except for like a small bunch of people in Sofia. Most of them, by the way, on the left, but small bunch of people in Sofia. That that there are some that you can have a mass liberal party. It's just a complete nonsense. I mean, you could posture for this, but not even against your base. I mean, you could posture like in front of the European institutions or wherever, like abroad and stuff like that. But and that was part of the posturing of Boyko Borisov. Okay, so like his main credibility leverage, so to say, was that he was kind of repeating this mantra that he is, and his people, his party, they are the face of Europe in Bulgaria because they are so likable by the Europeans. And of course, they are likable by the Europeans, particularly by the Germans, because the Germans invented them. And the German conservatives created this pathological cancer-like, organization. And they had very great relations with the German government, particularly with Angela Merkel.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like
Yeah,
it boils down to why do we have to suffer under Boyko Borisov's thumb? Because Angela Merkel likes him. That's the answer.
And that is a topic that's well, one of these days, I'm definitely going to have you back on, because I would definitely love to talk about Germany's real role in the world and Germany's real role in Eastern European affairs. But
and how Angela Merkel likes to pretend that she is this Eastern German, calm,
yes,
assertive Hausfrau. Okay, instead of being aggressive politician on a European or international level, which keeps nations like the Bulgarian one, keeps them under semi-dictatorial rule, okay, by gangsters, and this only helps contribute to the civilizational downgrade that we've been experiencing pretty much since 1991.
And that is a perfect segue to the second question, which is that's a perfect segue to the second question, which is, I see that the West, when I say the West, I'm talking about EU, NATO, allied countries, are not backing off their efforts to oust Alexander Lukashenko and his party. Briefly, if you can you explain to an anti-imperialist audience, or those who claim to subscribe to that point of view, why we should be opposed to efforts to oust and replace him with some pro-EU friendly liberal national endowment backed candidates, and demystify and debunk, if you can, the opposition in Belarus for us, because yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with the question: Why do I think we should oppose the Western meddling in Belarus? I think we should oppose Western meddling anywhere
Yeah.
in the world. It's not just that I'm because this is the argument that I get often, that because you communists or whatever, you socialists, you lefties, you always like those whatever Stalinist like dictators, and you've got some major incentive for dictatorship, and you kind of secretly love all those people who are these rapacious dictators and so on and so forth. That's not true. I don't understand where is it coming from. I can give you, there are people who like dictators and there are people who like democracy, and of course there are some people like this on the left, as they are in the left is not any kind of safe space. You will get all kinds of people, and
Yeah.
This is not really the essence of the thing. I mean, whether someone is a dictator or whether someone is a democratically elected leader, because let's look at Lukashenko. Okay, Lukashenko is a dictator, and a pretty bad one, I would say, especially the last 5-6 years. I definitely think that it would be great if the Belarusian people could replace Lukashenko with someone better. I think it would be a great political choice. There is a problem, however. First of all, who is this one? I mean, who's the candidate? Where are they? Where's the better candidate? I want to see a better candidate.
Exactly. Okay? Who are these wonderful democratic socialists?
Yeah, exactly. Please, and then people would tell me, oh, but the people have spoken because they took to the streets, and of course they took to the streets, and I support people taking to the streets, but I support people taking to the streets I mean, I will support a protest when I feel that there is some kind of, there are postulates of the protesting people that I can support. If they come up with postulates I cannot support, why am I supposed to actually condone this? Like, if I don't agree with their ideas, program, or whatever stance, okay, and the problem here with Belarus was that those people came out and they had no program. They had no idea. The only thing that they had in mind was really to get rid of this terrible dictator, because they've had enough.
Yeah.
And this is a deja vu for me, because it pretty much resembles the emotions around the protest, that were the beating heart of the protests in 1989. Where people, they've had enough. There's no freedom of speech. There's not enough democracy. There's not, many things, right? And we want it to be like in the West, because in the West, our some friends of ours went to the West to work there, for the summer or whatever. And they've seen great, fantastic things, shops full of goods, everybody happy, everybody, rich, everything just fantastic, the roads and the infrastructure in fantastic, they've seen all those things that obviously were contrasting with their impressions from Poland. The problem is only that they were not seeing what they didn't see was, the unemployment, the prostitution, the criminal life in big urban centers. They haven't seen many of those things, or if they have seen, they ignored them. So and of course I understand this. I mean, I understand this emotion that they're tired, they don't want this anymore, it's been too long, it's been since 1994. In the last couple of years, the dictatorial measures, they became harsher and harsher. And I totally understand you emotionally, man, and I can tap you on the arm, and I can or I can hug you, give you a hug if you like, or a kiss or whatever, or we can go and have a vodka or something. But that's not political. Like, if you want to launch a real political struggle, then please, what is this struggle going to be for? Because just struggle for removing Lukashenko is not a goal. I mean, how is this going to contribute to anything good? How is this going to? I like until now, I invite people who know. Please come on my program and explain how is this going to? Because if I had seen, masses of people taking to the street and I don't know, staging a socialist revolution, taking over factories and so on and so forth, then I would definitely support that. But there wasn't anything like that. What we have seen is a huge crowd of people that definitely, first of all, does not represent the political emotions within the entire Belarusian society. Alexander Lukashenko, whatever, regardless of what we think of him, he has a very large base of support in within the Belarusian society, and this cannot be ignored. Of course, not 88% or whatever the disputed electoral result was. Official, okay, but I'm sure it's over. I can bet, okay, it's over 50, way over 50%, like over 55, probably over 60. So those people that were there protesting, they definitely had legitimate grievances, and I don't deny those legitimate grievances. But the fact that someone has them does not necessarily mean that if they take to the streets and confront a leader that is definitely not the hero of my fairy tale, okay, politically speaking, then it doesn't mean I have to support them. I don't have any moral or political obligation to support them, especially when I can see the broader picture where this somehow strangely falls into the entire big puzzle of the American meddling in Eastern Europe, and in Eastern Europe in particular, in their crusade against Russia, China, and the those two countries basically. So I am against this meddling and against this American influence. I am against the American imperialist policies in our region, and I am against them because I have seen with my own two eyes what is the result of their rule. They just plunder your country, and they find an obedient clique of in Bulgaria it's criminals, in Romania I would argue it's secret services. In other countries, other potentially other groups, and this is how they basically exercise their imperial rule, and it's at the expense of it's at the expense of the dignity,
national sovereignty,
national sovereignty, elementary dignity. Okay, when it comes to everyday life, I mean, people are devoid of this dignity because they just they live in countries which are totally completely ruined. It's not like the entire Eastern Europe is like Bulgaria, but it's just a matter of quantity, not quality, like differences. So I am against that because I see what does it bring about, and I have arguments, and I can argue against that, and I invite anyone who supports American imperialism and American presence in Eastern Europe to come and confront me, and I will discuss them out of this easily, because it's really not a difficult task. So this is why I am against that, and I do not want the people of Belarus to have
go through the exact same thing that
hardships. Exactly that, and this is why I do not support those protests. And at the same time, I am aware that many of the organizations that were, including leading figures, okay, like Protasevich, the guy that was taken of the plane from Athens to Vilnius, right? It was a big story, and those people, they are definitely on the Western payroll. I mean, you can.
Yeah, I was just about to say, one quick follow up was this guy that was whose plane was forced to come down. He's now in jail and so forth, and he's
not in jail. He's under arrest and under home arrest. Okay, so he's not in jail, and that's an important difference because this.
I mean, isn't he on? I mean, isn't it very obvious that the guy is definitely on the payroll of the National Endowment of Democracy, which is a CIA front group, which is
we don't know we don't know whether he's paid by the National Endowment of Democracy, or what exact organization is he paid by. We don't know this, but I'm
Or
sure the
whatever
Belarus.
EU funded stuff, because the EU
Yeah, but
also does
Belarusians,
this.
but the Belarusians know that already, because one thing that we can be sure is that once he was caught and arrested and then interrogated, he started singing. We know that because then he was forced to go to the media and have the Belarusian media, and he had to make those humiliating interviews and something I don't really like, because it's North Korea like standards. But I
Yeah.
think that it wasn't really meant. It wasn't really meant to show that Lukashenko is somehow following Kim Jong's Un whatever lifestyle or rule style or something. It was more for the West to understand that it's over, guys. We've got everything. We've got the numbers, we've got the people, we've got the names, we've got the addresses, we've got everything. So just shut up and go away. And they did. That's what happened. So we had a month or month and a half of protests. The protests were, in the beginning, I would say, quite interesting as a phenomenon, and many left-wing, they are marginal forces, but many left-wing organizations did join those protests. Many left-wing people were arrested and even held in under arrest for a long time, and of course no one reported on them. We only heard about those brave Belarusians that are somehow supporting the whatever Euro-Atlantic ideas. But I want to say this: those protests were it quite quickly turned out that it's something.
They were
There's
paid
something.
protests that they
No,
that, that, that
that
was
I
basically
don't
like
know
a
whether they were paid,
counter-revolution.
but I don't know whether they were paid. I don't have any evidence for that, but that there's something fishy about them. Like, the growing anti-Russian, for example, sentiment within those protests, that turned off a lot of people. And I think that this is, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, because, you could have tried that in Ukraine and it did work to a certain extent, but you cannot try that in Belarus, because people don't understand that. Particularly the Americans have no understanding of it, I'm sure. It's one nation, really. I mean, Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians to a large extent, because what is Russia historically? Like, the Russia consists of three parties: the Greater Russia, which is more or less the territory of the Russian Federation today; this Lesser Russia, which is East Ukraine and south to Odessa and to the borders with Moldova; and White Russia, which exactly means Belarus. That what it means. That's what it means in English. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
so this is basically the kind of thing that there is a huge cultural, civilizational, linguistic, historical, all kinds of unity, okay, between those three countries. And I just don't quite see how it would be possible to actually get Belarus to go, to somehow switch over to completely alien for them environment like the European Union. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I don't know what they were hoping for. Did they really think that this is going to happen? I mean, let's even assume that they would actually get rid of Lukashenko and they would, install a puppet government and stuff like that. That would probably create a warlike situation, or maybe even a hot shooting war with Russia, because there's no way that Russia would ever allow their real borders to be somewhere near Smolensk in that particular region. And to have a hostile country, a hostile government in a country like Belarus, which is probably, again, it's difficult probably for the Americans to imagine, because they don't have that history and they don't have that culture and they don't have the kind of historical trace of events that puts nations together or countries together, communities. They don't have that. They are just 200 years old, right? And the only remarkable
And
thing,
for
or
them,
the
just
two
like
remarkable
everything,
things, is the
and just for them, everything that's Russia is bad. Tsarist Russia bad.
yeah
Communist Russia bad.
yeah
Putin,
exactly.
Russia bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually comes. The Russophobia is not an American invention; it's a British invention, and it's been around for a long time. We could talk about it sometime later. But I just want to say that this is a meaningless concept. A meaningless concept for anyone. And it's very strange for anyone with any kind of basic knowledge about the region to think that they actually can rip off Belarus from whatever you want to call it. I mean, some will call it Imperial Russian, whatever. It's not true, but the kind of connection, the connection that they have with Russia, you just cannot have. You cannot break it. I mean, you could at a huge price. And at a price of war. Okay, this is you already have that in Ukraine. Okay, and by the way, we mentioned you mentioned Lukashenko, dictator, and stuff like that. But look, in Ukraine they had a democratically elected leader, Viktor Yanukovych, whom again I don't necessarily like much. But why would I support an armed coup d'état? Okay, a right-wing, obviously right-wing extremist-led coup d'état in a country like Ukraine, which obviously, again, anyone that has any knowledge of the region knows that it will end up in a civil war. And
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned Ukraine, so I'm going to save this question about Poland for last. Actually, well, yeah. Let's get on to Ukraine since you did mention Ukraine, and hopefully we'll have time for the Poland question that I had prepared for you, which is yeah, on to Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, sadly, under Zelensky, we talked about this when I was on your program. Under Zelensky, détente with Russia and trying to find peace and reconciliation between the two Ukrainians is basically just like gone to the tubes. And he thinks that you can find reconciliation and join the EU and the NATO. And
that's let's just dismiss it. Okay, this isn't happening. I mean, this is just
and I wanted to
you
talk
can
about,
fantasize about whatever you like, but Ukraine joining NATO in any foreseeable future is just
you talked about the about the armed coup that happens in Ukraine, right-wing coup that happens in Ukraine. So I want to talk to you about the normalization of fascism and or if we really want to be politically correct, ultra-Ukrainian nationalism. Now, I was watching Ukraine have the Ukrainian football team playing a match between my father's country of Holland, and I saw on their jerseys they had the symbols of Svoboda and these Nazi symbols, these Ukrainian Nazi symbols on their jerseys. and apparently on the back of their jerseys it said glory to Ukraine. And I want to talk so I want to talk about this and the fact that can you also talk to us about because you mentioned Bulgaria, you mentioned Belarus, and now we're talking about Ukraine. Can you talk to us about the use of expat civil society groups, not just from Ukraine, but from across Eastern Europe, who play a huge role in propping up these rival oligarchs, these far-right forces, and their usage of the weaponization of legitimate issues. It could be queer rights, it could be reproductive rights, it could be corruption, it could even be workers' rights, and how they use that to gaslight people to push through more imperialism and reactionary reactionary policies.
Right. Well, that's a complicated
Oh,
question.
And one last thing, and then and the reason why the reason why I asked this question is because I read an amazing historical historical series, investigative series by this Canadian anti-imperialist journalist and activist called Richard Sanders, who basically exposed all these civil society groups founded in Canada, and they all have like wonderful names like the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the Estonian Canadian Congress, the Latvian World Congress, and stuff like that. And basically, he exposed that they were basically founded by runaway Nazi war criminals, Nazi collaborators. They lionized Nazi war criminals and Nazi collaborators like Stepan Bandera and so forth. And yeah, and it was those expat civil society groups that pushed through this coup in Ukraine. And I know for a fact that that most likely similar organizations are involved in Belarus and the divide and conquering of much of Eastern Europe.
Let me begin with the confession that I don't have that much of an expert knowledge like the guy you referred to, that is the producer of those whatever documentary movies or what was the thing you referred to, right?
Yeah.
So I cannot speak specifically about this organization or that organization doing this or that in one in whatever country in the region. I can speak in general terms. So there are organizations like NGOs that are obviously funded by the West, and we've got tons of those, and of course they are problematic for us, for the left, and of course they are problematic in general for the entire society because they terrorize it, or they help terrorizing the societies of Eastern Europe by the whatever capitalist market regime and the imperialist thumb of the United States. That's all true, and definitely this is the case. Many of those organizations have links to this guy Soros, and this creates, of course, this is exceptionally difficult because this creates a lot of incentive on the right to criticize those organizations, but for the wrong things. I mean, they criticize them not because they promote. I mean, sometimes they do that too, but in most cases, it's because whatever because Soros wants to. There are these conspiracy theories that he wants to destroy whatever the nation.
He wants to install a cultural Marxism.
Yeah, cultural Marxism and stuff like that. And
to which I say, I only wish.
Yeah, I mean, I wish they had to do anything with Marxism, really. Even if it comes to culture, then I would be able to probably collaborate with them at least to some extent. But I can't, because what they are promoting is actually lab clean neoliberal mantra from the 90s. I mean, when you look at the websites or of those organizations, or when you look at their some let's say speeches delivered by their leaders, they are rocking it like it's 1995, literally. So of course they're not going to say things like, because they were trained, so they're not going to come up to you and they're not going to tell you, we want everybody to be poor and only a handful of people to have some dignified life or to be super rich or whatever. They're going to go and say that we got to have freedom, or that we got to get rid of all the communist remnants or remnants of Stalinism in the form of trade unions. Or they're going to go and tell you that we need to have more democracy. And like, more democracy means like, what exactly do you want? Because, last I heard, I was, and my comrades were for more democracy, like, for example, democracy in the workplace. And when you tell them this, they say, no, not like that. More democracy, let's just have another layer of local government. So in other words, let's extend the bureaucracy. Yeah. Okay, so those organizations, the problem that I have with them is that they were very influential, and our governments after 1989, extremely obedient. And they were basically taking, those organizations were pretending they are giving those governments advice, but in fact, they were giving orders. Okay, so those organizations were facilitating the civilizational disaster that the Eastern Europe has been going through over the last 3 decades. And this is a very problematic thing, of course. But those organizations would be nothing had there not been the imperial masters, had there not been the support of Berlin, had there been not the support of Washington, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to those organizations themselves on the ground in Bulgaria, in Poland, in wherever, well, they're going to exist, obviously, right? And at the moment, they are just the extension, in a way, of the imperial whatever powers that be. The problem that I have with them is they don't admit that. I think it would be easier if they had admitted this, and everything would be clear. And of course, it would have been great if our governments admitted that, yes, of course, there's no sovereignty. We're just discussing everything with not even the American ambassador. We're discussing with the fifth press attaché. So that's the problem that I have with those organizations. And of course, they are very rich, and because they are very rich, they were able to sort of buy their way in the public sphere, public discourse, public debate, and so on and so forth. And they became reference points. I think they did not deserve this position, but they have it because, as I said, they're rich and powerful. So this is what I can say about now. Whether there are relations between right-wing extremist circles that were groomed by the United States or Canada, I don't have any knowledge of that, specific knowledge of that. One thing I can say in regard to Poland, because you mentioned Poland earlier, but probably we're going to talk about it later. But I just want to say that the Polish migrant circles, okay, in Washington, not in Washington, sorry, but in America, in the United States or in Canada, are extremely right-wing, have always been extremely right-wing, and were only welcomed in the those people that immigrated were only welcomed in the United States because they were escaping communism, you see. So that's, and of course, I mean, you get a bunch of people who are prosecuted for whatever reason, and some of them were prosecuted probably for their political beliefs, but many were prosecuted because of their criminal activity, okay? And it was very easy at those, those days to just, escape, okay, cross the border, and then shout how you were repressed politically, where in fact you were you were a fugitive, okay, and you were being prosecuted for, I don't know, stealing 100 cars or something like that. So you see, when you get this kind of conglomeration, of course there is just no other way that it's naturally going to develop into a right-wing, full of resentment and full of spite, okay, community, a pathological community. Of course, it's going to develop into something like that. And if you assist this process, okay, if you help, okay, like if there's state assistance, I mean, then obviously you're gonna get things like that, and you're gonna get all kinds of fascists, anti-Semites, monarchists, libertarians, all kinds of crazy people. Okay, and the fact that they have any say today in Ukraine, the credit goes to Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, and all the rest of the gang. Okay, look at Ukraine today. Ukraine is a super miserable country, divided, split. Probably is going to end up in some kind of partition, whether it's going to be official or not. I mean, there is partition already, really. I mean,
do you think? Do you think we actually could see, sadly, the ends of Ukraine, and that is because of those douchebag civil society groups with a lot of skeletons in their closets. And
Youri, let's not blame the organizations, because it's very easy. I mean, we see that happening all over Eastern Europe. There are groups, mostly right-wing, but not only, who are just obsessed with this idea that NGOs, we have to get rid of the NGOs. No, look, the NGOs are just a tool, okay? We have a bigger problem. We have a problem that we are the periphery. And this is a problem. This is a problem. It carries a lot of advantages and disadvantages, okay? But the main disadvantage is that you need a strong partnership. You cannot have, you cannot be a country like Bulgaria or Poland and pretend that, when you kick out all of the NGOs, then you're going to be, a kind of partner that could compete with Germany or Japan or China, or, it's not possible. it's only the mythology of the right wing that actually fuels this kind of sentiments in the society. And I understand those sentiments in a sense that, people are so tired of it. I understand it. I understand it fully. But again, I mean, this is not a political thing, okay, to just shuffle emotions and to, create a lot of hype around things like the right wing likes to do. So, I understand your criticism, and I think it's fair criticism. But, the problem is that we need some kind of international solution, and we need to look for that solution, and not just to obey anyone that comes across. Okay, like, okay, it was the Soviet Union, now it's America, then tomorrow is going to be someone else. And because this way, if we look at Bulgaria, for example, we're just gonna, we're gonna lose the country. I mean, we're gonna lose the state. We're gonna lose. We almost have already lost the society, in a sense that, I think I might have said that on the last time I was on your show, that we had nearly 10 million people in 1989 as the population of Bulgaria. Now we've got about 6 officially. So 6 or 7, anyway, like 10, over 30% of the entire population emigrated. Okay, so without it's like, normally this sort of results you get when there's a war, a major war happening in your country. 30% of the population dies, disappears, and stuff. No, we didn't have a war. Okay, it was enough to actually reinstate capitalism. That was enough. And see what happens. Like 30% of the people had to go because there was just no way for them to stay there. And moreover, the desperation also stems. I mean, what demonstrates the desperation is that they had to go exactly to the west. Okay, I mean, it's not their first choice. What I'm trying to say, and the same goes for Belarusians and other people. That's why you have a lot of Belarusians, for example, in Poland, because in Poland they can still feel more or less okay. Yeah. If they go to France, or if they go to Britain, or if they go to Spain, it's just totally different for them. It's not like where they and it's not the NGOs. It's our task, our job to come up with a political alternative, but with a kind of alternative that will take into consideration the question of foreign policy. Because we like to talk as the left about how we're going to raise your minimum wage, as if it makes any impression on anyone anymore. But that's a different story. Yeah. But we don't like to say what are we going to do in terms of the of foreign policy. Moreover, the left increasingly in Eastern Europe, that's my observation. It might be superficial, but it's that they follow the liberal democratic path, which is the Euro-Atlantic thinking, and I even heard leftists in Poland, meaningful, like reasonable people, saying that we don't like the United States, but then they are still our ally, and then there's China, which is a fascist country. I mean, a left-wing person saying something like this, you obvious. So we're going through because of that, because we don't want to.
And that said, like, I understand that Eastern Europe as a region does have legitimate grievances when it comes to Russia, which is a whole other topic. But I understand that there are some that do have legitimate grievances, and I certainly wouldn't want to paint every single Eastern European expat that went to go move to the United States, Canada, and elsewhere as all a bunch of people with Nazi skeletons in the closets. But that being said, I mean. But that being said, I mean, even if you do elementary research, or even if you know elementary history, that like shit has gotten worse for you guys since the end of communism, since and life in the European Union has not improved that much. NATO membership, okay, so you're basically signing up to be a partner in crime to the American empire. And then on top of that, it's like, you're all controlled by right-wing oligarchs, by socially conservative douchebags. And yet Russia is too bad for you, even though Russia is basically like, like the same thing that happened to Russia happened to you guys. I mean that, that's why I advocate detente and stuff like that. But anywho, it's just like, I'm stunned that that people can still have these imperial blind spots and think and think that NATO Yeah,
No,
your
the
response
problem
to
is
that.
the problem is really that it's not. I mean, you're correct to say that there's this imperialist neoliberal guardian, invisible guardian in the left wing heads. Okay, that it's there and it prevents them from actually, formulating a program that would challenge, the democratic liberal capitalist order. Okay, that just prevents them from doing that. And of course, the last two or three decades were used by the international propaganda and particularly by Western imperialism to enforce this kind of culture of shame on the left. Shame on you
Yeah,
for the Soviet Union. Shame on you for the Eastern Bloc. Shame on you for Stalin and all the rest of it. I don't see why should I be ashamed? I mean, this is the kind of thing that we have to, in my opinion, internalize and accept. Okay, this is part of our history because the lefties were taught to say, "Oh, but so the Soviet Union wasn't socialist because it wasn't democratic," or something like that. I'm simplifying that, but those are the
yeah,
the texts.
yeah. You also get these
And
people.
wait, and I'm like, come on, guys. Like, of course, that Soviet Union wasn't very democratic. I agree with this. But and in China today we also have deficits of democracy. But just to write it off because they don't have just because they are not as pretty as you would like them to be, you're writing them off. Oh, but there was Stalin. Okay, so there was Stalin. Fine. Do I agree with I don't know the kind of Stalin's concepts that you have to exterminate all your enemies physically? Of course not. Like, do I support? No, I don't support that.
Yeah,
But I'm not going to obsess over this, and I'm not going to apologize for this. I didn't elect Stalin. I didn't, I didn't do anything about it. Like, what do I have to do with Stalin today? All right. So, and I think we should just acknowledge that this was a part of our. This was a part of our history, and if we were serious about it, unfortunately, we weren't as the left globally. We should have drawn a lesson. We should have analyzed. We should have thought over carefully what was wrong about the Soviet system, what was good about the Soviet system, what was good in or bad in different countries. Because socialism, Soviet socialism, obviously this was a kind of a style that was then repeated in many countries. But every country had its own peculiarities, and you had socialism, or some call it bureaucratic socialism. I don't necessarily like that because the bureaucracy, in terms of numbers, in terms of quantity, actually expanded after 1989. Like
yeah,
really, in Bulgaria, for example, we had about 75,000 civil servants before 1989. Now we've got nearly 200,000. Okay, so so the kind of Soviet-like socialism that we have had, it had different characteristics in Bulgaria. It had different characteristics in Poland. It had different characteristics in Hungary or Yugoslavia, for that matter. Okay, and now we have socialism with Chinese characteristics, which I think
yeah,
also deserves our attention, despite the fact that yes, there are certain deficits of democracy which have to be addressed, or should be taken care of, should be analyzed, should be thought of, and I think it should be done in a serious manner, not in a manner that my heart goes out because those people don't have democracy. I'm dying here. It's like it's not serious. We want to. What is the situation right now? Is there a chance that in this capitalist, vicious, imperialist environment, they could have more democracy than they actually have? Because there is an extent. I mean, democracy does exist in China to an extent. Basically, what you cannot do in China today is that you cannot organize massively against the central government. That's the only thing you can do, pretty
yeah.
much, right? Otherwise, if you want to protest, I don't know, against whatever local, and local in Chinese categories means something else than in Belgian or Polish, okay? Because it's a huge territory, and the local authorities have a lot to say. And you can organize against them, and there are strikes, and there are all kinds of things and protests, and civil organizations, even if you like, okay? I mean, I can give you even examples of that. So,
All true.
so what I'm trying to say, because I heard you saying that already a couple of times, that there are legitimate grievances or legitimate objections to whatever in Eastern Europe. I don't think they are that legitimate. I mean, there are objections, and there are people who definitely suffered from the fact that they might have had a friend, or themselves they could have been a political prisoner or something like that, or prisoner of thought or whatever. But we're talking about a very small amount of people. I mean, Seriously, there is this
Okay.
perception on the left that all of those countries, they were just repressing everyone literally who thought, who's, dared say anything against whatever, Joe Stalin or something like that. And there was a period in this 70 something year long history, okay, of the Soviet Union and then, the Soviet bloc and so on, when there was a lot of terror, okay, and a lot, and people were really, really frightened, particularly in the cities where, the secret services were active and so on and so forth. Of course, that was the case, okay, the 40s, like in the 30s partially, and so, yeah, but we're talking about this amount of time, okay, and it does not encapsulate the whole story of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. And then, or people would say there was poverty. And they would refer to Poland and the 80s. Well, of course, I mean, if the entire nation was on strike, then obviously you had poverty, right? And I'm not condemning the striking workers by saying by that, but I'm just saying that there is a reason for this. And obviously, this was a terrible decade. It's a lost decade, and it's a shame, okay, that it happened the way it did. But it's one country. For God's sake, one country for 10 years. Okay, so like you cannot, what they're doing is they're taking those examples, the most pathological, the worst cases, the worst elements, okay, of that history, and they extrapolate it, showing that this is pretty much how it has always been all along, everywhere, in each country, and so on and so forth. That's why I would say today that we should have the civic courage and the political and the moral and the political courage to say that we think that the people's republics, they could have been reformed, and they should have been reformed. They shouldn't have been torn down. And what happened in 1989, despite the fact that people were, got carried away and were very hyped up and so on and so forth, this was not a revolution. Like, for example, Chris Hedges likes to refer to that, a journalist I admire, an American journalist I admire. He says that, revolutions in 19, that's bullshit. That's absolute.
Yeah.
Those were, if anything, those were counter revolutions. But even, he likes to, let me just use 2 minutes to say that, to refer to an anecdote that Chris Hedges
go ahead.
likes to come up with. He says that, he witnessed, because he was, I think, in the GDR, that is East Germany, when Honecker fell. And he was reporting on that and so on and so forth. And he was, he wrote like numerous articles and then about that. And he referred to it as the revolution. And then he also repeated that many times on his programs and so on and so forth. And pretty much last year, I think, the Russians have actually disclosed documents where it said that confirm that it's the KGB that organized an anti-Honecker putsch. And Honecker used to be the dictator of the GDR, okay? Because there was no other way to get rid of him. It was just, he was too popular, okay? So how they collaborated with the Hungarians to organize immigration of the most right-wing elements through Hungary to the West Germany, in order to, make a mess and destabilize the situation in East Germany, all right? So, yeah, please, okay? I mean, this was mostly the entire transition, and the revolution was, for the most part, treason. That's what it was, for the most part, and to some extent, counter-revolution. That's how I would describe that. And then, we had this situation. Now we are able to elect our own governments. So what? That's my question.
Yeah. In fact, and unfortunately, we're out of time, and both Boyan and me have a meeting to go to. So the last thing I'll just sort of end it on is we didn't get the chance to talk about Poland, but we are going to talk about it next time around, because this is going to be a series of conversations, because I really do want to talk about the negative role the expat communities and the civil society communities play in Eastern Europe, and we can even expand it to the Middle East, Africa, Haiti, and so forth. Because I was going to ask you a question about Poland, and again, I just did very elementary research on Wikipedia, which I know we're not supposed to be doing our research on, and Solidarity, led by Lech Walesa, that anti-communist trade union organization, it was getting money from the CIA. When the National Endowment of Democracy was founded in the early 80s, because the CIA was already getting such bad publicity
reputation,
due to their massive human rights abuses, the National Endowment of Democracy was basically just like a CIA front group to do a lot of the dirty work that the CIA could no longer do. And yeah, solidarity, the trade union, the anti-communist trade union organization was getting money from them. And lo and behold, is it a coincidence that after the end of communism, Poland has become this, as you described it, this Catholic fundamentalist regime?
Yeah, so I think Poland is an interesting case because actually the Poland, unlike Bulgaria, for example, or unlike Hungary, they did gain quite a lot from, or maybe in a way I shouldn't say unlike Hungary. In fact, in this particular respect, those two countries are similar, because the kind of the 90s were terrible. The 90s were terrible everywhere. But then it seems like after the period of the initial, let's say, primitive accumulation of capital, it seems like things started to settle.
Yeah, the shock doctrine.
Yeah, shock doctrine. Yeah, but mostly I think in class terms, I would say that the primitive accumulation, I mean, was completed in a way. Okay, those that were ready to fight for that were ready to steal really the wealth that was created by the People's Republic and to build their fortunes on that theft. They did this, and there are many anecdotes about it, and perhaps we could talk about them sometime. Some of them are funny, some of them are really telling. Okay, about how the transition really went in its beginning, in its initial phase. And then it seems like Poland became useful. Because it's a relatively large, territorially speaking, country with a population of 40 million. So we're talking about a serious player, okay, in terms of whatever market, trade, and geopolitics as well, okay.
Yeah.
So so there was this geopolitical shift, and particularly Berlin started looking started demonstrating interest in sort of Poland becoming its sphere of influence and to control to some extent at least the political process there. And this is pretty much how the Civic Platform, the party of Donald Tusk, was formed.
Yeah.
And again, it's a long story, so it's just please, I apologize for all the oversimplifications here, but
no, it's all right.
Time. Okay, so that once it happened, then a conflict appeared between Berlin and Washington over who's actually going to have the last word in Polish politics, and that's why we have this rivalry between the Civic Platform and Law and Justice, which is the Catholic fundamentalist party. And funny, isn't it, how you can actually translate local politics into international structure of influence, so to say. And but that's very clear in Poland, okay, and in other countries as well, by the way. But the architecture is a little different, okay. So in Poland, we had a bit of infighting, okay, within the ruling class, within the political class, and finally, in 2015, Law and Justice came to power because it was able to challenge all other parties by breaking some of the consensuses that were made in 1989 regarding how the political actors are going to behave during the transition and after the full restoration of capitalism. And one of the consensus was that that the transition will never be criticized, and it never was. I mean, it's difficult to believe, but there was almost not a single critical voice for over 20 years, okay, in the Polish public sphere. That would be a meaningful voice that would be disseminated by papers or media outlets of repute, and so on and so forth. So they broke that consensus, and they started explaining to people how some of them have lost, and that was very appealing, and that was very, I would say, refreshing, because people finally felt like politically they have air to breathe, okay, because someone's actually talking about them. And the other consensus they broke is to demolish the entire social welfare system, and to make sure that things are just as neoliberal as it gets without any softening element. And they broke with that too, and they've re-entered some even new ones, not necessarily re-entered, because that would refer to things that were in place before 1989, but they kind of expanded, or very moderately, but still symbolically it carries a lot of weight, the social welfare system in Poland. And this is how they have built their legend, and this is how they have been flirting with the people, okay? And this is how they have also switched the public debate from we're going to vote against the gay people or in favor of abortion to we're going to vote for those who give us money, which is a smart trick, right? But
Yeah.
except for that, I have to add that before, in 2014 and 15, there was a major scandal in Poland that helped Law and Justice eventually taking power, which was very funny, because those were leaks of recorded conversations in a luxury restaurant in Warsaw, where the Civic Platform, the then ruling party, Civic Platform, top-ranking bureaucrats, used to have their conversations. And of course, it was then explained to the public by the Polish prosecution that it's three evil waiters from that, restaurant who conspired against the Polish democracy and all the rest of it. But we know very well, because afterwards it turned out that those three waiters, they don't not only recorded the conversations of those politicians in that particular restaurant, but they also recorded some conversations of Donald Tusk, the then prime minister, in one of his private homes, which I don't think those waiters had access to that home. So I'm suspecting some, first class specialists might have actually helped them do this.
First class deep state.
Right. So yeah, exactly. And then it was, then it was impossible. And I mean, come on. I mean, Poland also, there are Polish secret services. They didn't know anything about it. So what I'm trying to say is that the Americans have actually, in my opinion, of course, helped, they made sure that despite all those steps that Law and Justice has been taking, they made sure that there's this major scandal compromising all the, most important politicians of the Civic Platform, just to make sure that they're gonna run Poland now, okay, and it's gonna be their people, and they've done, I think, Law and Justice, they've done fantastic job, okay,
and hey, everything worked out for Donald Tusk, because so many losers that become part of the European Union, he became part of the European Union for
oh, very, very important,
and got to rebrand himself as this socially liberal kind of guy, even though he's from one of the rival far right parties.
Yeah, so look, and now, obviously, the Americans are withdrawing not only from Borisov and from Netanyahu, but they're also withdrawing their support for Kaczynski, because, Kaczynski was their favorite when Trump was in power, and obviously they counted on Trump being there. I don't know, they thought he's elected forever or something, I'm not sure. And they put all of their eggs there, in Trump's nest, so to say, and or his basket. And now, it's like they can only rely on the hype that they've created over the last 6 years, okay? And I think they can run on that for maybe another year or two or something like that. If nothing major changes, then obviously they're going to be out of power by the next election cycle.
But only going to be replaced by another right wing.
Oh yeah. There is no replacement at the moment, and even I got to tell you that we perhaps don't have the time to talk about it right now, but I think it is an interesting topic. I mean, even they are replaced by the politicians of the Polish left. Let's just fantasize that because we have a parliamentary coalition, a left-wing parliamentary coalition in the parliament, and let's just fantasize how massively people vote for them, for the three parties, now two, that form this coalition, and this coalition, I don't know, wins, repeats the result of that occurred during the elections or after the elections in 2001, when the Democratic Left Alliance had won 43% of the votes. Okay, I mean, they had almost constitutional majority. And of course, they wasted it. But that's, again, another story. But let's assume they're going to be there. Where's the program? I mean, that's because, where's the substantial part of the program? Because I heard already all those things that they're going to, allow LGBT people to get married. I heard about how they're going to make it easier for trans people. I heard about how they're going to make a clear division between the clergy or the church and the state. That's all great things, but what apart from that, like, sex ed at at school, yes, definitely, but I want to see, how are you going to be better candidates? Where's the money? That's my question, really. Where's how much, and for whom, and when, and in what form? All those things that are somehow absent from the public debate. And also,
that's probably in closing, that's probably because of the of the different oligarchs that also influence whatever is considered the center left in Poland and the elsewhere. Is that like we'll flood your money in different organizations into helping queer rights, which I do support, reproductive rights, which I do support, sex education, which I do think is good.
Sure,
but
but who says
that we're not going to give you money? We're not going to give you money to help out workers' rights and to radically change the economy in any way which helps out everyone and anyone, and that's Yeah, Lord.
Yeah. That's the sad part, and unfortunately, I think that I'm afraid that even if they had taken power, and even if they even provided the moderation of their postulates, I'm not really sure whether they would be prepared to actually confront the church. I think they're posturing now because they know they can't win any elections in the foreseeable future, and they can just run their own little show somewhere on the fringes of the political process, and they can be satisfied with this. And unfortunately, very unfortunately, this situation is the highest ambition of the majority, I would argue, of the left activists across Eastern Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to have some kind of prestigious show that they can run, but it's got to be small, without responsibilities, where they can occasionally posture. So, having a small parliamentary representation, going to whatever TV or studios or radio stations every once in a while, writing bombastic manifestos, and that's it. And that's great. And then, taking some money from here and there, whatever German social democratic foundations or whatever NGOs that would be sponsored by Soros or someone else, doesn't matter. And that's fine. That's all they want. They don't want they don't really believe that any major change is even possible. And I think they've long ago given up on the idea that they could actually be the political inspiration, or that they create political inspiration for the masses of people to support them. I think that's
some are probably just waiting for a cushy job in the European Union. But on that note, because both you and I have an appointment to get into, we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Boyan Stanislavski, the editor of The Barricade, which is a brilliant pan-Eastern European left-wing news outlet, which I really do encourage people. Go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to them. Check out The Barricade online. They have an English publication, and if you're from Romania, Poland, and Bulgaria, they also have they also print in those languages. And in some other languages. Boyan, this is going to be the first of many conversations because I do want to get deeper into the very insincere expat civil society groups, and I do want to revisit Poland in the Cold War and the negative role that CIA agent Pope John Paul II got. Played in destroying the country, but we're going to save that for another time. Thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to the conversations. This is fantastic, and ciao.
Right, I'm looking forward to.
Ciao until then, and power to the people, dead to the imperialist fascist pigs.
That's right. Stay healthy and keep fighting. Thanks a lot.